without further ado, I'd like to welcome the IEEE President-Elect for 2018, Jim Jefferies.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thanks for the invitation to be here and to meet again with the Region 1 leadership team. You're going to hear a lot of very positive messages from all of the candidates during the forum after lunch. So I just wanted to kind of briefly update you with some of the things that are top priorities right now for the IEEE board and for the leadership of IEEE going forward. And I think it ties in with some of the messages you've already heard earlier this morning. I just wanted to spend just a few minutes here to update on a few topics. So I always like to always begin with thinking about what is the fuel that drives IEEE today. And I think it's really three things that drive IEEE today. One of them is our membership. You know, we're a membership-driven organization. It's membership and members that create so much of the value and also consume a lot of the value in IEEE. Membership is a critical component of IEEE. The second thing that fuels IEEE today, I think, is our mission. And the question had come up very legitimately about, do we have a clearly stated mission? Are we able to execute it? Our mission, advancing technology for humanity, for me is a mission that both members, future members, and the general public can all align with. But we need to get that message out there to people so that they understand it. And the third thing, I think, is the basic values of our organization. I mean, a lot of people want to be a part of IEEE. When we stand for trust and integrity and information and sharing and all the things, those basic values bind us all together. That's an important part of who we are today as IEEE. If you look at just some of the statistics, and we talked about this, 423,000 members, except in March, it goes down 90,000 members. And so this question of membership is a critical one for our organization. Not so much as a dues issue necessarily, but as a vitality issue of the organization. If it is the members that create so much of our value, you know, it's important that membership be a sustaining thing. And so it's really critical that we have a continued focus on our membership as the vitality of the organization. Our global reach, we're in 160 countries now, and if you go to meetings in other parts of the world, if you have a student branch meeting and everybody's in the room, it's not real clear what country they're from. They're the same. And so this opportunity, that's what a lot of what our organization presents. And our technical breadth with 46 councils and societies. We continue to be a major conference provider, 1,800 conferences around the world. We're a sponsor or a co-sponsor. And our technical database, 4 million documents now in the Explorer database, and one of the most widely cited sources in the world, probably publishing about 1/3 of all the technical information in our fields of interest. And top-cited periodicals. So the publications, our 200-plus journals, are clearly the most cited in terms of developing. So these are important technical breadth, and our standards continues to be very important. 1,300 active standards and more under development. And standards can go deeper. There's really a third element beyond our geographic reach and our technical depth. There's also our social impact that the organization can have. And so global public policy, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but the idea that our voice can be projected out into important public policy decisions and changes that have been made in the last really year and a half to allow this organization and any one operating unit of this organization to take public policy positions and to communicate them. Our humanitarian efforts. Our mission does talk about humanitarian efforts, and we have a breadth of them. They include a Humanitarian Activities Committee of the board. It includes SITE, Special Interest Groups in Humanitarian Technology, which are very active. In fact, Art made the reference to the National Geographic special this last weekend. That was a SITE project, Special Interest Group in Humanitarian Technology. We also have EPICS, engineering projects in community service, where people have reached out to provide electricity and support to areas that, and in IEEE USA, we have a MOVE project, for disaster recovery that represents our brand and projects our brand into important situations, and our continuing education. So this is all part of IEEE today. So how are we meeting some of these challenges? Well, we are continuing to grow as a global organization. And we've added a few offices. We've added a second office in China in the last year. So in addition to Beijing, we have an office in Shenzhen, which is a little different part of China, a little different aspect of China with entrepreneurship and other things. We've also recently added an office in Vienna. And so office manager will take office in Vienna about the 1st of July. We'll have that office up and active. So we continue to grow around the world. I talked about membership. Our membership actually last year grew. And you say, well, how does that reconcile with the chart you saw earlier? Well, it grew in one region, region 10, by 10%. It declined in every other region, all other 9 regions. And this is part of our challenge, to understand our relevance to these markets and the importance here. So we've had a consistent strategic plan, and it's really in 4 parts. You know, and the first part is building these communities, dynamic, flexible, diverse communities, you know, and in multidisciplinary areas. In many cases, the communities don't necessarily align anymore with the standard societies that we have. They cross over, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. The second has been providing really vital forums, keeping our base. I mean, we are the base of technical information in our fields of interest, but we also need to be the one who's at the leading edge of new things and new technologies that are coming. That's important to the vitality and future of our organization. The third area is leading humanitarian efforts. It's in our mission, and we need to have a much more unified front about our humanitarian activity. It engages members. It represents the organization. It does an excellent job of representing what IEEE stands for. And finally, leveraging our policy insight to provide governments and NGOs and other organizations with technology policy information around the world. We've had some discussion about that already this morning and the value of doing that. So how does the board bring together some of these things? If these are the things we care about, what are we doing to bring these together to both keep a focus on them and to support them financially? So these are the current ad hoc committees of the board of directors. One way that we identify our priorities and focus is the ad hoc committees. And some of these are things like Africa, Europe, and India strategies. Now, these are countries we're already growing in, so what do we need a strategy for? We need a strategy to integrate all the capabilities of IEEE into these markets. That's why we're seeing the growing offices and continuing to grow in those areas. We have some other important areas. I wanted to mention the third one down, continuous improvement. This is actually an ad hoc committee that I chair. And this ad hoc committee is focused around taking some of the ideas from last year's 2030 activity, which had a lot of opportunities for us to improve the efficiency and the operation of our organization. But instead of doing it in a dramatic, big shift kind of a way, we're going to do it on a continuous improvement. And I think, Art, you had mentioned communications. I think that's an excellent example of a communications direction that can be done with incremental improvement. You know, there are small things we could do to connect people at the right time, to connect them in the right opportunity. We want to do that across the organization. So we'll be sharing this with the board at the next board meeting, a list of 10 or 15 things that this organization could change and begin to adapt to the future that it's going to need. Also, our Industry Advisory Board continue to focus on the importance of industry and members, and we've recruited some people to, I want to call them titans of industry, but leaders in industry that could come in and help us work on improving our outreach to industry. And alignment, strategic alignment and oversight. You know, if we have these 4 key strategic goals, are all of our operating units also buying into those goals, and are their plans in line? So we can bring this organization together. Our greatest strength is when we're able to bring all the pieces together in our organization. So if we have all these things, it's like, what's the next step? There's nothing else left to do. We already have everything done. But the fact is that it's really about expanding our reach. I like to say here that global means doing what is needed locally everywhere. And this is what brings you all into the picture. We do deliver our programs locally. And I thought Sun Wan in the presentation really got at the point about this. You know, we have to deliver locally with the things that we have. And when I talk about new markets, it doesn't necessarily mean someplace we've never been. A new market for locally may just be a group of engineers in an industry that hasn't been reached before. It could be as simple as a product that we already have, but you've never done it in your section or your region. And so, you know, these are the opportunities. This is how we can grow the organization as well as retain the members that we already have. So if we want to do a lot of these things, one of the challenges we have is how do we fund it? How do we keep these things going? And so for the last 4 or 5 years, we've had the Future Directions Committee, and the Board of Directors has set aside a significant amount of money in the millions of dollars to do this every year. And these are some of the key areas. Now, these don't necessarily line up directly with our existing technical structure, and so it's new kind of a thing. And the idea here with new initiatives that this is, think of this chart moving from left to right in like a 3-year time frame. A new project comes in and it gets funding to get started, proposals are made, and at the end of 3 years, we're looking to have a permanent home in the organization for this. Several graduates have occurred and gone off the end of this chart, including smart cities and a few things, smart grids rather, and a few things like that. So these continue to develop, and these are funded every year along the way. And these are the big technical ones, so obviously you know these, but there's others too. Along the way here, we funded European public policy, reach out to the European Union, our ability to have a voice in European things. Chapter meeting recording, where we basically have set up some money and funded the ability to record chapter meetings so that they can be repeated later in the future. Technical English program for people outside the United States who, English is our language of technology, language of IEEE, but we could improve on that. So a lot of different things. This isn't just about technology. And seed grants, and I'm talking about things in the 20,000 to 40,000 range, available to any organization in IEEE who wants to make a request for funding. So that's an important part of strategy. I talked a little bit about public policy. The Global Public Policy Committee was formed probably 2.5 years ago. The board approved the charter for that committee, made it permanent last November, and also now allows a policy document that lets any organization unit in IEEE take a public policy position. It's submitted and approved, but the foundation is in place for us to really grow our ability to use that voice. A second area of concern is IEEE tech ethics. How many have heard of tech ethics? So, yeah, well, it's one. That's good. As we begin to roll out, ethical considerations are going to be an important part, another voice that we can have. You get into artificial intelligence, you get into autonomous vehicles. Ethics issues are going to be very important, and so our ability to grow in that area. And then the Society for the Social Implications of Technology behind it. And some of these all mix together. So it sounds nice and simple. You make a list, but it really isn't that simple. Things mix together, and I think the Internet Initiative, the IEEE Internet Initiative 3I is a good example where you have technology issues, you have policy issues, and you also have industries who want to take this in certain directions. So all of this working together, is a special kind of community. We can talk about a few other things briefly and then wrap up here. One is, how many have heard of Global Spec? Okay. So Global Spec is a company that we purchased last year. It's a for-profit company. You say, how can a not-for-profit business own a for-profit company? Well, you can do it if you organize the accounting correctly and independently, which we did. And so Global Spec became IEEE Global Spec when we purchased them. And now, we purchased them because they have 8 million subscribers in industry and opens up a market for us to reach out to industry practitioners, to put our brand in front of a lot more people. It's funded primarily by advertising from the manufacturers and people that are in the business. So new kinds of thinking about how we can grow our visibility and our voice. Another one I can talk about briefly, Innovation Q+. Anybody heard of Innovation Q+? Okay. This is another opportunity that we started last year that links our Explorer database, this huge database of 4 million articles, to a patent database of 70 million patents. If you could search a lot quicker through our data and through the patents, this would be a benefit to certain members, not to everyone, but this is another kind of tool in a different way for us to expand some new areas. We've talked about Collaboratech. Collaboratech is, at this point, a concern for IEEE Board of Directors. We've made a significant investment into this. We're now wanting to make sure, we're going to have a big report coming up in a couple of weeks. We want to make sure that this is a tool that is finding its way into achieving the missions that I talked about earlier. is how's it going to work? Industry professionals. We'll continue to be very focused on what we can do to reach out to industry professionals as a potential for growth in the organization, as well as an important market that we may have lost contact with. And finally, an important activity, the Board of Directors, we had a retreat earlier this year, and it was focused around this idea of creating the next generation of IEEE. So what should IEEE look like to appeal and serve young professionals in underserved communities globally, and what should we do to get there? So we spent several days talking about this topic, and there are a whole series of projects that will be coming out regarding that, basically that next generation. And it's not so much about making us look like them, but how do we integrate them into who we are? I mean, it doesn't do us a lot of good if we just set up a separate channel just for them somehow, but don't integrate our whole organization into the opportunity associated with making it. And it gets into deep things like building the right infrastructure to enhance their engagement, giving them engagement opportunities. This year, for the first time, every committee and every one of those ad hoc committees I showed you earlier has a young professional member on it, and that's by design. And so you have to create the opportunities and do the engagement and learn from those opportunities. Recognize the importance of some new opportunities in places like Africa and entrepreneurship, where these are members that we may have not served as completely as we could have. And supporting the development of young professionals. I mean, what they expect from IEEE may be different. I know when I joined IEEE, there wasn't any doubt in my mind when I got my degree that if I could be in a professional society, I was going to do that. But that's not a given to today's graduates. And so we have to put that message out in front of them. So a big focus on young professionals as we go forward. So that's some of the update from headquarters, if you want to look at it that way. And again, I'll be here all day to answer questions that you might have or anything you'd like to input to me about how IEEE can continue to grow its importance in the world, meet its mission of advancing technology for humanity, and move along the forward path of that strategic outline that I provided. Thank you very much.
Jim, thank you very much for that very enlightening talk and what's happening in the upper echelons of IEEE.